Happy to welcome you. My name is Michael Brenner. I'm the director of the Center for Israel Studies. I'm very happy to welcome you as the host for this event today. We are very excited to have Ari Shavit here, and it is one of many exciting events the Center for Israel Studies actually has organized during its 50th year of existence. It is the first center of its kind in the United States. Listening to Ari Shavit at a book presentation a few weeks ago, I decided I wanted to do two things. First, I wanted to use his book in my class in the history of Israel, which I'm doing here, and quite a few students of the class are in here. And the second, I wanted to bring him to AU for public discussion, and I'm very happy that this worked out. When he agreed to come, I did not know yet about all the amazing reviews the book would get in the weeks to come. And I'm particularly pleased about the outstanding panel we were able to bring together with David Gregory and Jeffrey Goldberg joining Ari Shavit. Thank you very much for coming here. And I'm very grateful also to the institutions that made this event possible: the Israel Institute, the Natan Fund, the Jewish Studies Program, and the School of International Service at American University. I'm particularly grateful to SIS Dean James Goldgeier, who has shown both enthusiasm and support for events concerning Israel and the Middle East, and who has contributed much to turn AU into the campus which the Princeton Review has called the campus with the most politically active students. It's my pleasure to welcome Dean Goldgeier.
Thank you, Michael. So as I look out, it occurs to me that our students were really slow on the RSVP click. I'm very impressed with the speed with which those of you who are not students got your RSVPs in for this event. Well, welcome to American University. As Michael said, I'm Jim Goldgeier, Dean of the School of International Service. It's very easy to support the work the Center for Israel Studies is doing. Michael and Laura Cutler have just done an amazing job with all sorts of exciting programming, and I'm always delighted to be asked to co-sponsor. And in this case, was delighted when they asked me if I would introduce our moderator, David Gregory. You all know from Meet the Press. David has been with NBC since 1995. He was based in Chicago and Los Angeles. He was a White House correspondent during the George W. Bush years, and of course enlightens the nation every Sunday morning. It's always wonderful to have him here on the campus of American University. David received his BA in International Studies from the School of International Service. We're very proud to have him as an alum. We always love having him back on campus. He also serves with great distinction on the SIS Dean's Council, for which I am extremely grateful. And he will now introduce our other two guests. I wish you all well for the program, although I guess I may need to, are all the mics on? I have this one if anybody needs it. He's a tech wizard. Now we know how they get Meet the Press set up all the time.
Can everybody hear me okay? No, you stay there. Boom. You can
David, floor is yours.
There we go. All right. Done. We're done. Okay. Hi. Welcome, everybody. Can you hear me okay? In the back, in the balcony, we're good? There's a student section, apparently. It's just not in this building. Welcome. This is a great honor for me to be here. I always love to be back on campus, with two friends. Ari, a newer friend, but I feel much closer to him having read this book, which is extraordinary. If you haven't read this book and you care about Jewish identity, spirituality, Zionism, and Israel, you must read this book. It's a profound book. It's an emotional book. And it's an incredible contribution. So Ari Shavit is here. Ari, it's great to see you.
Great to see you.
Congratulations on this book. My very good friend Jeff Goldberg and I became such good friends because of his book called Prisoners, which was about his own Jewish identity, experience, his journey back to Israel, and the experiences he had. An extraordinary book as well. And so they're great companion books for any bookshelf. Is that pretty good?
I would, yes, that's very nice.
But it also is going to make for a really interesting conversation because these are two people who love Israel. These are two people who are willing to wrestle with what it means, what Israel means today, wrestling with what it means to be Jewish in the world. And so that's what I want this conversation to be about. We'll have a lively conversation up here. We'll leave room for your questions. But here's how I want to frame this, with kind of a provocative question, I think, about Israel. And that is whether Israel is essential to the American Jew. Is Israel still essential to the American Jew? The Jew who is thinking about spiritual growth, the Jew who is thinking about community, and the Jew who is thinking about purpose in life. So Ari Shavit, how, why, and is Israel still essential to the American Jew?
I think that it is essential. I think that, as I say briefly in the book, and I've said it several times in the last few months talking to audiences throughout the country, the second brilliant insight the early Zionists had was the realization that non-ultra-Orthodox existence, non-ultra-Orthodox Jewish civilization is in jeopardy in the post-ghetto world. So while I have every respect and admiration to all the spiritual work, the spiritual struggle, the spiritual, all the inspirational part of Jewish identity which you refer to, and I think that you feel closely about, strongly about, there are still the basic facts. And you have to relate to the basic facts. And we see the basic facts in the Pew Report. There is a reality out there, and there is a reality here. And I think that, I don't know if there are any Jews in the audience, but in case there are, I think...
Just raise your hand if you're Jewish.
Raise your hand if you're not Jewish.
Yeah, raise your hand if you're not Jewish.
But the personal challenge that every Jewish parent and grandparent has in this country is it's a combination of a personal issue, an identity issue, a collective issue, and a people who challenge.
But you're saying that the Jewish people would not have survived but for Israel. Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is that if you need Israel. I'm not talking about the safe haven part of it, which the people in this country do not need. I'm talking you need Israel as a powerhouse for Jewish identity, for specifically non-ultra-Orthodox. I mean,
see, okay,
this is So all Israel has to be the basis for all the different options that will grow. There's more spiritual work done here that I admire than in Israel right now. But if you want an ongoing base, to guarantee a future where this spiritual exploration can go on for a long time, you need a place, you need a Jewish home.
A center.
Exactly.
Jeff, a spiritual center, a center of peoplehood, and maybe even less so, a safe haven, depending on your point of view. So that's an argument that it is essential. Israel is essential to the American Jew.
Well, Israel is, you have to deal with a core contradiction of Jewish existence, which is that we are a tribal religion, a tribal people with a universal message. But I don't want to focus on the universal message because we all know about that idea. But the tribal part is very interesting. Our religion takes place in a place. Our holiday cycle is built around the weather patterns of a particular place. Our connection to the heroes of our people, they all lived and flourished and died in that place. So you can't have a Jewish identity without that place. the type of sovereignty that place has is a more open question. I agree with Ari largely. I would point out, just because I'm going to play the role of diaspora spokesman up here and he's going to play the role of not diaspora spokesman, I would point out that the American Jewish community, and yeah, I've read the Pew Report, and many aspects of it are depressing, many aren't. I would point out that American Jews have over 4 generations defied all the odds. I mean, this country is a machine of assimilation. People shed their identities so quickly when they get here. Jews have not only not shed their identities, the identities have shifted and changed and universalized and done all kinds of weird things. But we're still here, and not only that, spiritual life, Jewish spiritual life, and many aspects of Jewish education are flourishing here and are more creative than what's going on in Israel, because Israel has become a fortress of the ultra-Orthodox, despite what you say and about the role that it needs to play. The other point I would make, contradicting the previous point, is that we have been dependent on Israel in 2 main practical ways over the last 65 years. The first is for identity. I mean, it's always saddened me, this is not a political statement, but it's always saddened me that the largest gathering of Jews in America each year, non-ultra-Orthodox gathering, is the AIPAC convention, which is essentially a political convention, right? And I'm not making a judgment about AIPAC, I'm just saying that so much of our identity is built up around defending Israel, supporting Israel. And the final quick point is that the growth of the phenomenon of birthright, where we send literally now, I think over 300,000 young American Jews have gone, means that something has failed here. Like the American Jewish leadership has decided that we don't have a good way of keeping people Jewish here, so we're going to drive them through that Israeli car wash for 10 days, and they're going to come out the other end bright, shiny, happy, proud Jews. So it's an interesting problem when you have to move people 6,000 miles away to give them an identity as American Jew.
So here's my challenge, though, Ari, to you, which is you have a lot of younger Jews in America for whom the concept of safe haven is not what animates their Jewish identity. And to Jeff's point, one's Jewishness in America can too often be defined by the foreign policy and the threats, foreign policy of, and the threats to Israel. Is that peoplehood? Is that what it was supposed to be, a light unto nations? It seems different than the kind of identity creation that you're speaking of.
Well, the point is that I'm very unhappy with the way Israel is and the way what it projects. And I think the challenge here is for both communities. Mm-hmm. I think that Israel has to rise to the challenge of being attractive. It should be, first of all, worthy to its own people. But at the same time, it has to be worthy for you people. And I think that really I really believe in this interdependency. And in this sense, I really fear inter-Jewish isolationism. I don't want the American Jewish community to withdraw into its own borders, and I don't want Israel to be alienated to the American Jewish community. These are the 2 great pillars of Jewish existence in the 21st century. I like very much and appreciate very much all the other Jewish communities, but there is no real hope and future there. Mm-hmm. And this is, I mean, the sad fact is that Hitler did win. I mean, most Jewish life was in Europe, and there's very little, if you compare it to what it was in the past, it is basically of no historical significance. So these 2 communities, the Jewish Israeli community and the American Jewish community, this is up to us. And I do not believe that we can face the challenges we face there and the challenges you face here if we don't re-establish a very close relationship. And I've said it before that one of the really things, and this is where I totally agree with Jeff, what really makes me angry that for a long time we've seen this alliance between what I call Tea Party Israel and Tea Party America. And this keeps away those Jews, especially the progressive Jews and the non-Orthodox Jews, who need Israel more than any other Jews. And this is a crime.
Define
this
who's
is this
Tea Party
is a crime.
Israel. Who's Tea Party Israel?
The
Names. We need names.
Names.
I think that the combination of the settler movement with the political ultra-Orthodox, with the more extreme right-wing forces, this creates Tea Party Israel.
Yeah.
And these people have, in my mind, they lost it. They stopped realizing what Israel is really about and what it should be. I said it a few hours ago in a smaller meeting. Israel cannot survive without capturing the moral high ground in every respect. We depend, our existence, not only on our morality, depends on the fact that we have the moral high ground. And for too long, for decades, it's not a specific politician, specific prime minister. For decades, we've neglected this. We went to kind of brute force, extreme ideas, too nationalistic, too religious, and this pictures, this taints Israel in a way that endangers this, and especially endangers this intimate
Jeff,
relationship with you.
One of the issues, there's a couple of things there, and I don't want to forget this, and I know you'll bring me back to it, which is the extent to which Israel seeks to direct the Jewish religious life of Jews in the diaspora, which life cycle events, setting. Well, I want to come back to that.
Right.
But the other issue has to do with whether, you say Hitler won. Is it possible for the Jewish people to survive today without a center, without Israel? Is assimilation possible, or would it happen all over again?
Look, I mean, it would be ridiculous to sit up here and say that the Jewish people can't survive without Israel. As a people, we're really good at surviving. I mean, there's no Jebusites anymore, right? I mean, there's no Hittites, but we're still here, and that says something about our ability to survive in diaspora, in exile, in the most adverse circumstances. We're not really good at sovereignty. I mean, we 3,500-year history. We've been sovereign for 400 years or so, and tumultuous.
We're not great with the diaspora either.
Well, but we're here. I mean, the point is that
many of us are not.
Is that many of us are not. No, look, all of us are simply representative of a remnant of a much larger, whether it's been persecution or assimilation or whatever. I mean, we're all part of a saving remnant. So I'm not going to argue that Jewry can't survive without Israel, because it did do that for 2,000 years. I think, on the other hand, I mean, the sort of key point I think you're making is that this experience here is an original experience. We haven't really ever done this before, which is to live in a diaspora society that does not feel at all like exile. I mean, in a culture that so embraces Jews and Judaism that the culture itself feels in so many ways Jewish. I don't know. I mean, we're in. I guess the two main Jewish communities of the world are both in uncharted territories. We haven't done the thing that Ari is involved with before. I mean, certainly not in the full light of modernity. And we haven't had this experience where everyone in this country who's Jewish is a Jew by choice. And now it becomes a test as you go into the 5th generation, 6th generation. Can you, without ghetto walls, without persecution, without discrimination, is your product good enough to keep people interested in?
Right, but it's also different, Ari, in that American Jews are Americans first. And I mean, I think that's the case for most American Jews. We are not living under a government that has heavy religious participation. So, I mean, Jeffrey talks about, like, we're remnants of, like that we were all at Sinai together. Just tell him I'll call him back. And that seems to be a core difference. I mean, Israel's still constructed under the guise of not just safe haven, but like the silo of Jewish identity across the spectrum.
I want to refer to this while continuing what Jeff said, because my basic claim is because the claim, and don't get me wrong, I'm a very much pro-diaspora person. I'm not anti-diaspora. I'm not one of these like old guard Zionists who think, you know, everybody should go there. Not at all. On the contrary, I think it's my duty and my mission to help you strengthen your community. I do not want you to come there. I mean, anyone who wants to come, great. But
There's
this
your
is
headline.
not.
That's
I think that the new Zionism should be about strengthening the American Jewish community and strengthening Israel simultaneously, not trying to have this kind of competition between the two. What is the point? Again, if I want to connect the dots here. We were great with this diaspora business, the Jewish people, but that was the old world. And the brilliant idea about Zionism, the brilliant insight was that the old formula is not relevant anymore. And the great achievement, really, and this is where...
The old formula being that assimilation could work.
I call it in my book, you know, the 2 Gs, you know, the intimate relationship with God and the walls of the ghetto. These defended us. Now, that stopped working about 100 years ago, and the Zionists realized that. Now, what we've seen, and you know, one of the moving reactions I had throughout the country in these months is people who come to me and saying to me, you enabled us to love Israel again. And it's especially moving when it comes from young people. And what I suggest is, really, I think it's time we love ourselves a bit. It's time we are so much into self-hate and so much into bitterness and acid in the Israeli way and the American way. And if you look at the last 60, 70 years, these 2 men-made miracles of Jewish sovereignty there and the perfect diaspora here are astonishing. This it's not, we all know the Jews had great individual success in business, academic life. This people that has been so dysfunctional in many ways in the past, in the last 60 years, created it's unbelievable achievements. But both are challenged, and both can only be sustained if they work together. And as I said, I'm very angry at my nation, the Israelis, for not realizing this and not understanding that we must change our ways in order to have the role that is needed for you, while I ask you not to give up on us, not to believe that Israel is just these dark forces, because I do not think so. And I think it's we actually, again, we have to replace that other alliance, which I object to, with the new, renewed, and real alliance between progressive and American Jews and progressive Israelis who are really trying to maintain these 2 amazing success stories.
It's interesting because I think you talk about what is affecting attitudes about Israel outside of Israel. And I was recently in Israel in October and had a chance to meet with Shimon Peres, and it's a really profound experience. Here is one of the founding fathers of the country, and I asked him what the moral was, what the lesson was for Jews all over the world of Israel's existence, of his experience. And he said, Judaism cannot survive without morality. And I thought, if you think about it, it's a profound statement. And yet I wonder, Jeff, whether Israel's difficulty in the world right now is that it's seen as more Goliath than David, right? I mean, you know, that it suffers from that.
Well, it suffers. Look, anti-Semites will have their views, and they can't be changed. And let me put it this way. Israel has 2 problems. It has PR problems, and it has problems. And the PR problems can be fixed with PR, and the problems can't be fixed with PR. And yes, the difficulty in talking about this issue is that a lot of things are true. They seem contradictory, but they're not. The world there's a double standard applied to the state of Israel, and it's an unfair double standard. It's rooted in many cases in traditional modes of anti-Semitic thought. It is a small country, so it's already going to be besieged because it's small. On the other hand, it is the victim of a lot of self-inflicted wounds. I mean, you know, to me, the true, going to what Ari was talking about, one of the real tragedies of the settlement movement is that it makes Judaism seem small. I mean, going back to what I originally said, I mean, Judaism invented equality, the idea of equality. Judaism invented the idea that man is created in God's image. Judaism created freedom for the whole narrative of Judaism is from slavery to freedom. I mean, it is the biggest ideas in the world. Okay? And the settlers make people think that Judaism is about rocks. You know, like we have to sit on this rock, and you can't have this rock because it's my rock. And that to me is tragic, and the manifestation, you know, how that plays out, obviously, in sometimes brutal ways and small-minded and petty and repressive ways. That's dangerous, and I mean this is where Ari and I are really truly in agreement that the Israelis, you know, for such a small country, it can be very myopic. You know, I mean it's a very interesting dilemma where they're so internally focused, they don't understand what they're doing to themselves and what they're doing to the image not only of their country but of their faith. They have to grapple with the fact that a Judaism that seems small and petty is not good for the Jews, just in terms of their own security, but it's really not good for all of the rest of the Jews who think of Judaism as something larger than just the possession of a set of hills.
I think there is, I totally agree, but I think there is like a third, beyond the PR and the real problems, there is a third layer, which is really troubling. I think that in many ways, the post-World War II world, and definitely the 21st century, based in many ways on Auschwitz, in a sense, is a world that is very aversive to any use of power. Definitely this decade and this time. The zeitgeist is the zeitgeist of appeasement in a deep way. I mean, almost any use of power is perceived as weird and strange and wrong. But our lesson from Auschwitz was exactly the contrary, because we said we tried this righteous, powerless option for a long time, and it ended up without us going up in smoke. So we came out in Auschwitz, so to speak, saying, we will not be powerless again. And we went to that country, and we chose this region, which is so brutal and violent, and forces you to use force. It forces you. So there is an inherent tension between us and Europe, less with this country, but definitely with Europe, because not only because I think there is anti-Semitism there is a layer of anti-Semitism, there is a layer of the post-colonialist complex, and there is the layer of this choice of most of the West to reject the use of power, while we live in a reality where the use of power every now and then is essential. So there is, and this is what troubles me so much, and now I get back to my anger at my governments, because had we had the Ben-Gurions around, they would have realized that this is the situation. In my mind, Israel today has, it doesn't have many military problems. Its main problem is its legitimacy. And our front, in my mind, is less the Middle East. We can deal with it. The Middle East is so, the different enemies we had and armies and so on are either gone and weak and so on. Our real problem is here, If we don't win hearts and open minds and get strong support, definitely in this country, but even in Europe, if we do not change the mindset, if we do not reposition ourselves, we really endanger ourselves in a big way, not only morally, but even politically and even militarily. I think that the legitimacy problem, the moral issue, is actually a threat to our national security. And I'm so angry at the people in Israel who do not realize this, that this is talking of light. You know, we have all the muscle needed. We have all the F-15s needed. But the way things are, we will not be able to use force even when it's justified, because we destroyed our moral positioning.
Well, one of the things that the Netanyahu government doesn't seem to understand, or certain people in it don't understand, that the American Jewish community and anyone else in America who supports Israel is a national security asset. It's not just, oh, they're going to buy some trees and they're going to fill up the King David Hotel at Passover. It's much more than that, and another indication of kind of not strategic thinking.
Well, but I see, to me, part of the threat is this question of irrelevancy, which is, you know, I like to think of myself as young, but since it's 25 years since I was at this university, I realize that that's quickly passing. But if you're a younger generation and you're thinking about, well, what does it mean to be Jewish? What does it mean to have a Jewish identity? What does it mean to form community? What does it mean to grow spiritually? What does it mean to live with Jewish purpose? Is it not easier for me to look at Israel and go, well, I love the concept of Israel, and I understand the Holocaust, but I mean, Israel is a strong country in the Middle East with its own foreign policy and its growing economy, and that's kind of their thing. But for me, as an American Jew, this identity building and creation is not really formulated by Israel anymore. And furthermore, I come back to the dictation of life cycle events. I can imagine a lot of Jews thinking, I don't need to believe I'm Jewish and have a Jewish soul because, the rabbinate in Israel has determined what's required for me to be Jewish.
I'm now going to do something I would never actually do, you would never allow me to do on your show,
Yeah.
which is to ask you a question because it's his show. But we differ a little bit in sort of the level of our Israelcentrism, and we've had this conversation many times over the years, and you have an answer to this question, which I think you should share. And I've actually moved closer to your position that one of the things we've done poorly in this community over 2 generations is we're good at, and I don't mean this to sound in a harsh way, but I do feel harshly about it. We're very good at supporting AIPAC. We're very good at sending trips to Israel. We're very good at building Holocaust museums. But we're not very good at spirituality. And spirituality, which is the area that you're interested in, I've grown more interested in, might be the key. I mean, can you do that for a second?
I just think the concept of, for me in my own life, and both as a journalist, I don't like to wade into a lot of these political questions because I don't think it's appropriate. But also, what animates me personally is my own sense of a sense of Jewish purpose, which to me is about spiritual growth. And I think, that's what. That's what our sacred texts can do as inspiration. But I think it's separate from even the existential questions and questions of legitimacy that Israel faces. I think that this is a task for all Jews to pursue through the inspiration of the texts and the I and thou relationship and the cultivation of our own self-improvement through a Jewish lens. So therefore, one's Jewishness need not be defined by Israel or identity created by Israel, but it can be inspired by a sense of Jewish morality and the quest to become a better person. So that's all I'm saying in terms of this issue of the relevancy question, because it seems to me, part of what you're saying, Ari, is it's so important for Israel to assert that legitimacy, to gain that legitimacy even after all of this time. And I'm questioning whether it has to remain as relevant in order to achieve that goal, if that makes sense.
But I find it, I have my spiritual side too, but I find difficult, this is like personal and intimate, I find difficult to talk about it. And so
just make believe it's just 2 people
in this conversation, I like to stick to the peoplehood question and which has it
but
needs
how do you separate that?
Well,
But how
I'm
do you
against
leave that
separation.
aside?
I'm against separation. That's about my point. So let me come close to where you are, but not. I really think that the uniqueness and look, I've been going now around universities and some places there were actually students that I was talking to, and I really saw it. What I knew before, I saw it. I heard it. I saw it. I keep getting mails and sending mails all the time to many young students that I've met in the last few weeks, and I see this deep tension between these kids whose values are totally universal and the feeling that Israel and the organized Jewish community in America are tribal. And in my mind, the only solution really is to bring to life and in a real way the fact that we are a universal tribe, a tribe with a universal mission. So I'll give you, I would like us, I mean, like throw a wild idea that I've been really thinking about, you know, jet lag and with all these experiences all the time. I would like, for instance, I would love to have a kind of Jewish peace corps that brings into it many of Israel's abilities, you know, planes, fields, hospitals, all kinds of things that we have, with many American Jewish kids who care so much about. So, say you'll have a Jewish Peace Corps task force, that the next time there is a crisis, a humanitarian crisis, we don't only send, you know, 7 doctors of the IDF there, or you raise some money in your shuls for that, but we actually work on this together as a kind of Jewish project that combines the abilities we have and the things that we have. I think that if we develop all kinds of new ideas like that, that enable us to work together and to give meaning and concrete reality to the fact that we are a universal tribe with a universal mission, I think it's right on merit, but I think it can move us into a kind of new dimension of our collective life, and that will touch eventually on the spiritual part as well, which I like.
I think that's very interesting.
No, I've been talking to people who are interested in these sorts of ideas and trying to formulate that.
Because one thing I would say is I don't believe, where I disagree with you, is that I do not believe that the separation is universal ideas versus tribal ideas. The AIPACs and those are political. These are political organizations that are about both legitimizing and bolstering Israel as a country and Israel's foreign policy and Israel's defense posture and the threats facing Israel. I think there are a lot of Jews who say, that's all fine, it's another country. Right. I can be Jewish and have a Jewish soul, and Israel and its issues, while I may be very concerned about its survival, are not what animate my soul.
What Ari is talking about and what other people are talking about with these ideas, and birthright is sort of this thing, is building this bridge between these two Jewish communities. But what I want to inject a note of pessimism here, because it's a Jewish discussion, and just point out that we are, right now, two sub-tribes moving in sort of opposite directions. Ari might disagree with the emphasis on this, but let me just go on for one more second. I mean, Israel has become, why has Israel become a source of ambivalence and even kind of unpleasantness for many young American Jews? Because it quite obviously is under the control of right-wing government that leans toward orthodoxy, that has as its most powerful political constituency within that government the settlement movement. American Jews, at the same time that Israel seems to be moving in one direction, American Jews are moving, generally speaking, in another direction, toward more universalism, toward more assimilation. When you talk about tikkun olam in Israel, people don't even know what the tikkun olam in America has become a central animating force of this community. In Israel, it means something completely different. I mean, so we are moving like two ships passing each other in the ocean, and I know what you're trying to suggest, that we've got to lash these ships together with whatever we can, but there are forces that are bigger than just a set of good ideas about non-political ways to make Jews like each other more, which is why I come back to this point on spirituality, because I worry about our children. I don't know if our children are going to be animated by the Menendez-Kirk bill on Iran sanctions in the Senate. And so I want them to stay Jewish, and I want them to be Jewish, and I want to reach for the transcendent aspects of Judaism, because I think those will hold them, and those will interest them in ways that the AIPAC arguments that you just delineated might not come in the future.
First of all, I actually like birthright. I know there is a lot of criticism of it. Actually,
I like it too.
I think it's a great idea. But I think, one, it's really not enough. It's like the very basic thing, and you really have to give it much more substance. But I see the other side of it, and which is I really want to see a kind of birthright the other way. I mean, I want young Israelis to come and learn from you, from the way you run your communities. I think that, as I said, I mean, I think there are many things that you take for granted here, that because this is the way you do things. But this achievement of having a voluntary community maintaining itself is something, we are very bad at this. We totally depend on the state and our politics. We are much weaker. I mean, we have many NGOs, but nothing like what you have.
I don't know that
but
we're so great at it either.
Well, that's the...
But,
really?
and the spiritual thing, because you do have such a variety. Now, again, we are moving. There are good things happening in Israel. Israel, really, I think it's not fair to see Israel. There is a real gap between our politics, our governments, and a lot of the news coming, and the real life in Israel. I think that real life and real people in Israel are actually really much, much better than their image. And on this spirituality issue as well, I mean, there is a renaissance in Israel in the last 15 years of people who are secular but are looking for their Jewish identity in all kinds of new ways, especially led by women. There is a lot of opening up within the national religious movement, which are actually within that Orthodox movement are actually becoming much more open. Again, a lot of it led by women. There is a lot of activity in Israel that is actually can be inspiring, but I want us to learn from you, and I want us to be involved just the way I want you to be involved in our lives. I want us to be involved with your life. I do not know what's the practical idea yet, but because being in this country lately, I run into this terrible problem of the cost of Jewish education. I think this is crazy. This is crazy. If we agree that this is the essential need to have Jewish future in this country, we should all do everything possible to enable affordable Jewish education in this country. And if there are any ways, I don't expect Israel to send shekels from to Washington. But if there are all kinds of ways, with summer camps, with teachers, with schools, I want like 100 ideas of different ideas of how we work together on reviving, maintaining, and, as you say, growing the meaning of our, again, non-Orthodox Jewish existence in this era.
So I want to get some of your questions so that we can have a conversation. We can continue this conversation, but we'll get some feedback from you in the course of this. Here's what I'm taking away that I think is really interesting. Look, this is something that I'm personally interested in, is what does it mean to be a Jew? How is that different from what it means to be an Israeli? I mean, I think what you're saying is there's got to be some connection, one to the other, to really get the answer to that question. The other piece of it is, what does it mean to live a meaningful Jewish life anywhere in the world? And from an Israeli perspective, it is to also deal with this legitimacy question. Maybe many people view Israel as a fact, but its legitimacy is not yet a universal fact. And as long as that is the case, it's going to be the subject of debate, political debates, and otherwise. Whereas I think a lot of American Jews will be focused on that question, will be focused on its defense, as well as what it means to be a Jew living in the diaspora in a country where we don't, I would argue most Jews do not fear another Holocaust, certainly not in this country. So that's part of what I'm taking away from this. There's lots of other issues. So let's get some of your questions as well. Let's ask good, tight questions. Come to the microphone. No speeches. Sorry? Students first. That'll take about 30 seconds. And then, we're all students. Don't listen to Ari. We're all students, right? Here we go, up front. Welcome. You can leave. Yeah, okay.
Okay, let me just formulate this for a second. So, hi, I'm Ari. I'm a senior here at American University. Now, I've been to Israel. I've studied abroad there. I went on birthright, but as you said, I'm an American first. So my question to you is, what is Israel? Is it a Jewish homeland? Is it a safe haven? Is it just another country in the Middle East that we support financially and militarily as a function of U.S. foreign policy? Is it a spiritual homeland, or is it just another place on the map?
Yes.
I think that Israel is the home of the Jewish people. I think that there was such a deep need to build this home because we were, and in many ways we still are, a homeless people. And I think we needed to build that home to guarantee our physical existence and our spiritual existence. That is not to say that there is no worthy life for many Jews, right now even most Jews, outside of that home. But I think the need to have, Israel is a classic, not another country. I mean, for better or for worse, Israel is a unique historical phenomena. In my mind, it's a unique human phenomena. In my mind, the existence of Israel is in many ways the triumph of the human spirit. And again, one of the things that I try to write about in the book and what I try to contribute to the discussion about Israel, that I think that there is so much distortion because of the ongoing problems that are serious ones, occupation, the conflict, all these problems, we lost sight of the basic Israeli condition and the fundamentals. And the fundamentals are that this is, in my mind, one of the most just projects one can imagine, because it was a project that was built to save a people. And I do believe that the Zionist revolution was the most amazing revolution because it gave a people not only political rights and social rights, but it saved it. It actually saved it. And while criticizing Israel for where it is doing wrong and where it is flawed, we have to bear this in mind. So in my mind, this is definitely not just a place on the map. This is, with all its faults, with all its flaws, this is one of the remarkable human phenomena that I know.
We'll come over here, but Jeffrey.
No,
comment?
but just a very quick point. I mean, Israel in some ways is a victim of its own extraordinary success. It is not coincidence that there are no Jewish captive communities anywhere in the world for the first time in 2,000 years. I mean, we forget what the previous condition of the Jewish people was. And we also forget, and Ari writes about this very eloquently, and many people have said this, that the great tragedy of Zionism is that it came too late. That if Israel existed in 1938, millions of Jews would have been saved. And when I talk about the victim of its own success, it achieved this role that it had to play as an ark for a homeless people. And the Jewish people today are in better shape than they've ever been because of Israel, and also because of this sui generis diaspora experience that we're having here, that I think, and Ari, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think is due in part to the psychological help and emotional help that the presence of a powerful Israel has had on the psyche of Jews, not only in this country, but around the world.
Let me get to this question.
Yeah.
I'm also going to call out a friend who's here, Greg Harris, Rabbi Greg Harris, an alum, AU alum, and a wonderful rabbi in our community. If you're so inclined, I would just be interested in having your perspective about this discussion as a leader in the community and as a religious thinker and an American and so forth. So if you're so inclined. Yes, sir.
Hi, Dan Latovsky. I'm an MBA student here at American. First of all, thank you to all of you for joining us. I recently read Max Blumenthal's book, Goliath, and I'm looking forward to reading your book next. I wanted to ask if...
It's the same spirit.
Great. I wanted to ask what you both think of the quality of discussion that we have here in the U.S., both inside the Jewish community and outside, about Israel. Is it comprehensive enough, and are we really touching on the important issues, or where is it lacking, and maybe where could we do better?
You know, there's this lie that in America you can't talk about Israel. You know, this is an astonishing thing that I hear. You know, I call it the taboo that won't shut up. You know, I mean, you know, it's extraordinary that you can't read a week's worth of New York Times without reading an op-ed critical of Israel in some way. I mean, so I don't buy this sort of martyrdom complex that you hear on the far left that, oh, you're punished for being critical of Israel. I think there's plenty of space. I think J Street has helped enlarge that tent to a great degree. I don't agree with everything they say. I don't agree with everything Apex says, but I think that conversation has been really useful to have. I mean, I think, and this has come up with on university campuses with this Hillel controversy. You know, the Hillel makes a rule that you can't ally a local Hillel with a group that doesn't believe in the existence of Israel or fights existence. And I do think that as a community, you know, you're perfectly within your rights to, A, have a little bit of self-respect, but B, say that, you know, after this point, I can't go anymore. And if you're an advocate of destroying the world's largest Jewish community, then there's probably no place for you in the broader conversation. But other than that, I think it's fairly open.
But I just want to say that I think what disappoints me is how secular and political the conversation gets almost reflexively. That we start talking about J Street versus AIPAC, or you start talking about you know, any number of the political issues that Israel faces, instead of thinking about to what extent does Israel as a nation animate an American Jew's identity, and to what extent are we animated spiritually? I mean, it's okay to talk about God in our faith and what God expects of us. That is where it all started. And I feel like it's almost an uncomfortable thing to say out loud in a room full of Jews. And that, to me, is the chilling
That was
effect.
the laughter of self-recognition, by the way.
But that is, in a way, the chilling effect that the definition of one's Jewishness, putting Israel at its center, has had.
If I may,
yeah.
I want to refer to,
Okay.
you know, again, with my recent experiences in different academic institutions in this country, I will not get into names. I was actually shocked by the exact opposite phenomena to the one you're describing. I actually think I've seen students and I've seen faculty members who actually find it difficult or even frightening to speak in defense of Israel. And I think in many parts of the academic world, there is a real problem where you know, being a lover of Israel or support of Israel is almost illegitimate. And I was in places where I was really shocked. I mean, you are the land of the free. And people were like whispering. People would close the door. And students sent me mails that are heartbreaking. Heartbreaking. Jewish kids who feel intimidated by their professors and by some of their peers. You know, this is for me, I was shocked and I could not believe that in this day and age, people will experience such intellectual terror. So I think there is a real problem on that side, actually.
That's a really interesting point. Over here, sir.
Norm Goldstein. I think one of the big issues is the educational system of raising Jewish people, raising Jewish children. There is no knowledge of the history of the Jewish people from the origins. There is no knowledge of the understanding of the complexity of American Jewish life or diaspora Jewish life. There is no real knowledge or understanding of the origins of the state of Israel and what it went through. You go there to Birthright and you see a modern state. There's just a total lack of understanding and comprehension to be able to be a defender, to be an advocate, to understand the essence of spirituality. And somewhere along the line, the discussion of these issues is always on the surface of what do we respond to the New York Times or the Washington Post. But no one is getting into the fundamental area of educating the Jewish people as a total community of the intertwining, the inextricable linkage of Jews the world over, of Jews to their history, and of Jews to the state of Israel, because it is the culmination of a dream that one can only understand if one puts it in historical context. And there's absolutely nothing done in any of the areas to do this. So I agree with Mr. Shavit that Jewish day school education, Jewish education, adult education may be the essence, but we are not fortified well enough to deal with it.
It's interesting. Well, it also gets into another issue, which is Jewish education beyond the day schools and beyond the Orthodox community, and how difficult, Sunday school and Hebrew school is, and how broken that model is. But we don't have to get into that. Greg, Rabbi, what are your thoughts?
Right. Thank you, David. Thank you to Jeffrey and to Ari for being here. That from someone that speaks from the pulpit, the conversation that your book allows us to have with Jews and non-Jews, whoever is coming to the community that week, is much more nuanced with the help of your book. And that nuance allows me to engage people of all ages with a sense of security, of passion, of creating a safe space, because the front page of newspapers is not a safe space for people to be engaging in Israel. We are too used to it being a binary discussion. You love Israel or you are a detractor of Israel. And I feel like the book really assists in that nuanced discussion, all within the context of loving Israel. Loving Israel from within, loving Israel from here. And so it's a great contribution, and I appreciate that. Thank you. One other thing I would add is that I found that some of the disconnect in the conversation on the stage actually is reflective of the disconnect between the diaspora and in Israel. We here in the diaspora are talking about identity, and we're talking about spirituality, and I love to hear you talking about God, right? And in Israel, it's a different discussion. And so just as an observer to the conversation on the stage, I see that playing out here as well.
Why? Why is there such a disconnect? Why does Israel, in that respect, seem so secular? Is that fair?
Most of the complaints are that Israel is not secular enough. So I think, I said it before, I think it's not fair. I think it's not fair because I think that, again, we have the major problem that religion was politicized in Israel. So you have political religion, which is unpleasant. And definitely it does not fit into your concepts of total separation of church and state, which is, by the way, an American concept, American and French. I mean, most European countries don't have your strict separation of church and state, but Israel is at the other end of it. So that creates the tension but as I said, first of all, Israel, look, I actually love, again, although I have my spiritual side, I love the element of the secular revolution that was in Zionism. But for better or for worse, this is very much gone.
This is
today's the Jewish discourse, the Jewish needs, the Jewish identity all these things have strengthened so much in Israel over the last 30, 40 years. The search for what you're looking for is out there all over Israel. So this image that Israel, it's only that I am, you are here. I mean, on television you have other concerns. You're here into the spiritual thing. I'm all for it, but I am very much worried about Jewish peoplehood. I think that's a legitimate concern.
Oh, no, I think it is too. I think
but I do not think that this, I think, and this is my answer to your deep question, why I think you even need Israel. Because I think
but
Israel...
But just be careful, because we're in a public setting. I don't want people to take away that I've suggested that I don't need Israel. Or I want to be careful that people don't interpret
but I'm saying Israel, the beauty of the fact that you have over 6 million Jews concentrated in a state that must respect the rights of its minorities and its non-Jewish citizens, but is in many ways engaged with the Jewish mission that has it kind of. The beauty of it, that it allows so many Jewish experiments. I mean, all the things that you want to do. I mean, it's a wonderful base for whatever Jewish experiment, Jewish spirituality, whatever Jewish identity. Right. It's not the content itself, but it gives you the base because, again, this is, in this sense, I am a Zionist. We have to remember that the diaspora experiment as it was in Europe ended badly. Now, I don't expect another catastrophe, don't get me wrong. But we need that element of physical, political existence in order to allow spirituality to grow. Because if we'll only be about spirituality, the combination of our history, and I'm sorry to say the demographics of this community, is that the future is not very promising. So if you want your grandchildren, if you want your grandchildren to be dealing with their Jewish spirituality, you need Israel.
That's a very interesting point, which is what about the... You don't find it interesting?
I find it extremely interesting.
No,
I'm sitting here listening to Ari talk about Israel as this cauldron of intense Jewish creativity, and goes back to this point about maybe the way some American Jews are perceiving Israel differently these days, and that's all fine to say. But when you have an Israel in which women who want to wear a tallis at the Western Wall are arrested, and that shows up not only in the New York Times and on TV, but from the pulpit when conservative and reform and Reconstructionist rabbis are saying, what is going on? When things happen in Israel that sound like they could happen in Iran, you've got a serious problem. And I understand, two things can be true. I understand that there's a cauldron of creativity, but we're dealing with the practical problem here. The way the rabbinate is in control of spiritual life is devastating, and I also want to sort of stand up for the creativity of the diaspora at this point. I mean, it is not as hopeless as I think you think it is here.
I can say
no. You said the future's not bright, so I'm torquing it out a little bit.
I think we are trying to create, which is perhaps nice, some disagreement where there is no disagreement whatsoever. I mean, you realize that
That's been our habit for years. It's fine. Yeah.
I mean, I'm the outrage I feel regarding all women in the world and all these world issues is as strong as yours. But again, first of all, these are the things you read about, okay? And it's true that Israel, because our entire political system and our political class are all so dysfunctional. You have crazy political events. I totally agree. What I'm saying, two things. The first thing is that in the larger, real Israeli society that is not within the specific ghettos of the settlers and the ultra-Orthodox, there are many phenomena that are promising in the sense of looking for kind of open, new Jewish identity ideas that are not oppressive and not contradict our values. But even if you look at the issue you raised, which of course I think it was outrageous what happened, but you see that even within the political system, people like Natan Sharansky and others are actually working very hard in order to find a kind of big...
Look, I'm saying...
And actually, talking, if you probably talk to some of the leaders of the movements here, you actually see there is a very intensive dialogue. Now, I agree, the situation is, politically it's crazy. We shouldn't have had a problem at all. But we are actually dealing with these problems, even our...
But I'm not saying it's not just political. I mean, I'm saying, all the brilliant, nuanced books and a Jewish Peace Corps and all of the drumming circles on the beach in Tel Aviv, these are wonderful, but there's a crisis. I mean, this is a real crisis in that hundreds of thousands of Jews in America under 40 or under 30 or under 20 even are looking at this country and not recognizing anything that they can relate to when they see these stories. And all I'm saying is that Israel, it goes back to this point I was making about that this is a national security issue for Israel is if Israel continues to go down these various paths, it's going to have enormous consequences.
Let me get in here.
Nothing can patch that up.
This gentleman's been waiting a long time. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, I'm Saul Newman. I'm a professor in the School of Public Affairs, and I'd like to take the conversation, if it's okay with Mr. Gregory, back to your book and to Israel, and a little less on Israel-diaspora relations. I want to play devil's advocate here. As I read your book, you're saying that the founding of Israel was just and moral because of the Holocaust and the history of Jewish diaspora, but at the same time, Israel was sort of born in sin. The 48 war, the expulsion of the Palestinian Arabs. And 67 war is the same sort of thing. It was a just war, Israel was threatened, but at the same time, 67 was sin. We occupied territories, we've abused the Palestinians. And I want to ask you about the perception of those two sins. The 67 sin seems unacceptable. We need to go back to the 48 borders. But the 48 sin, I don't think you want to preserve Israel. You want to maintain Israel. The 48th sin is not a sin for which we have to do repentance, so to speak. And I'm wondering if the difference between the two cases is that the 67 sin, the post-67 sin, was not the sin of secular Jewish intellectuals. It was the sin, it's easy to say it was the sin of the settler movement, and therefore we need to sort of go back to the 67 borders. But the 48th sin may have been the sin of secular Jewish intellectuals, but the difference was that Ben-Gurion did a wonderful job of hiding that sin, and we didn't know about that sin, and we only found out about 20 years later.
Not at all. First of all, 67, more than a sin, it is a sin, but it's mainly folly. I mean, this is so, what happened with the building of the settlement is so, in my mind, not only stupid, but it's really near, it boards, I mean, it's so, this project was so futile from the very beginning that that's the striking feature of it. But let me say something about who created the settlements. I mean, it's true that in my book I describe the settlers, the religious settlers who went there. But it was Yigal Allon who allowed them to settle in Hebron. It was Yitzhak Rabin and Shimon Peres who allowed them to settle in Ofra. It was Menachem Begin who allowed them to settle all over the West Bank. And it was Arik Sharon who was as secular as anyone who built all these settlements. So it's true that they're the force that went there, but the responsibility for this project is not on these religious people who went there. The responsibility is on the leaders and the governments who were all secular, mostly labor people. So this is why I think the explanation you give to the gap between these two events, I reject it. But let me go to the sensitive issue, which is 48, which is the one, because 67 is agreed, and 41 is the one I bring out in many ways. And it's very important for me to put this in context, because I thought, and I'm very proud of writing this painful chapter, but it's very important to put it in context in three different ways. One is the fact that wherever the Arab armies or the Palestinian forces won in the 48 war, not one Jew remained. And there were many atrocities. And therefore, the reason there is a chapter about Lida is just because we happened to win.
It's a political problem. You have political parties that become parts of coalitions that demand as the price of entry into the coalition certain privileges. And those parties are organized around Orthodox rabbis, and they have a particular vision of the world. And it's not the crisis that we usually talk about. It's not Iran, it's not the Palestinians. This is a Jewish crisis. And if it's not fixed, and if it's not fixed soon, a lot more young American Jews are going to say, I don't know how to relate to this place.
I think, Ari, one of the big questions, and you said before, the future is not bright for Jews around the world to cohere, to stay Jewish, for the Jewish people to survive without Israel. There's another component of that, which is that there are a lot of the Orthodox who believe that assimilated Jews, more progressive Jews, left to their own devices, will ultimately force the religion to just die away.
Yes.
We could cover that briefly, I think.
just the way that the settlements and the settlers are endangering Zionism, so does the surrender, the political surrender to the darker religious forces in Israel. In my mind, this is deeply, deeply anti-Zionist. Now, going to what the issue we've been hovering around. I don't think Israel should be the center of your life as an American Jewish community. It needs to be one of the centers of your life. You need Israel as one of the 2, 3 pillars of your identity. We need you as one of the 2, 3 pillars of our identity. And therefore, in my mind, it's time that Israel's prime minister and Israel's government and the Israeli political system realized that you people are essential. We have to reach out to you. We have to court you. We have to seduce you. We have to do everything possible, both because it serves our own interests and our own values. This is what I said. There is a majority in Israel and the majority in the American Jewish community that does have kind of potentially the same values, shared values. We have to work on this. You should not give up on Israel because of its darker forces, and we should put you, your future, your concerns, and your values at the center, at the very center of our life in Israel.
I'm going to make that the last word. Thank you all very much.
Sure.